phone call, then, we want to spend talking with you about engagement. And engagement is it's an interesting word and an interesting idea. And what we're really talking about here is getting the knowledge out and then slowly bringing people to actually using it. And obviously that's a process that doesn't take place in a single day. It's something that we need to think about and that we need to plan to take place over time. And I think we're going to touch on one of the most important aspects of it in just a few minutes. So this slide lists off for you some of the more common ways that we try and engage people when we're trying to change something. We use posters. We put them up all over the place. We put them up in the doctor's lounge and in the nursing lounge. I've seen them hung in restrooms. I've seen them out in the hallways of the operating room. So we use that, and some of them get read, and sometimes the message gets taken to home. We use bulletin boards in a similar way to put things up in places where people are likely to read them. A lot of times we have large meetings, and if you'll remember, that's one of the things that we would encourage you actually to think about is to talk to the people that work in your operating room in some kind of a large setting where everybody can get together, and that definitely has a role. Departmental meetings, particularly in larger hospitals, can play an incredibly valuable role in spreading information and actually in getting the commitment of people to go ahead and support the whole idea of using the surgical safety checklist. We can use emails. Email is just about everywhere. I get hundreds of email messages every single day, as I know many of you do, and spend a portion of my day now sorting through them for what's important and what's not. One of the things that I would like to remind you, though, is emails are very impersonal. They consist of print on the screen that you can read, totally devoid of any emotion, totally devoid of any of the other things that carry most of the communication message to people. So where they have a value, their value is extremely limited. Now, one of the nice things about email is how easy it is to send, which those hundreds of emails in my inbox every day, I think reflects how easy it is to send an email, because I can make a big long list of everybody who works in the operating room, push a button, and have my message spread wherever that email might go. It's a whole other thing to get people to read the email, especially if it has more than 2 lines in it. And then to read an attachment to an email is like nearly an impossible task. The point I'm trying to make with you all is that while email can be helpful, you cannot count on it to get your message across. Hospital newsletters in some places are very, very valuable. I think that it depends on your institution. A lot of times the hospital newsletter is a great way of talking to the general public about what you're doing and may or may not be effective at communicating with the staff in your hospital, particularly with physicians. And then where we'd like to concentrate for the next couple of minutes is to talk about the one-on-one conversation. Now, this is something that we believe, and we believe it, the people who work here at the Harvard School of Public Health and the people who spend a lot of time trying to help other people implement how important this one-on-one conversation is and why it's worth the investment in time. Sometimes these conversations can be difficult. We'll talk about that in just a couple minutes, but it's worth the time. If you think about what you're embarking on, which is taking the Joint Commission's Universal Protocol, which your little poll there told me has got a ways to go in a lot of our hospitals, and really going to give meaning to that universal protocol, and to it, we're going to add a meaningful conversation where people are going to share information. We're talking about a quantum shift in the way that we work in operating rooms, a huge cultural change. So you need to balance the ultimate effect and power of that with what you're going to have to put in on the front end. And for the people that have been with us now for these 8 calls, we've already made a tremendous investment in time and preparation to get to this call to talk about engagement. And now I'm asking you to make one more sizable investment in time and energy to go and talk to everybody who's going to be touched by this in your facility. Now, before I end, I'm going to talk a little bit about what I mean by talk to everybody, because I don't want to put the burden on the single person that's on this phone call to go talk to everybody in their operating room. That would be totally crazy. But the message needs to be carried verbally in a face-to-face conversation with everybody who's going to get involved in this work. And this includes anesthesiologists, CRNAs, nurses, surgeons, and surgical technicians. And I can tell you again, by hard experience in watching other people run up against barriers, that leaving people out of this very important conversation does come back to bite you. And it can bite you from an upset nurse who feels burdened by this work, an upset surgeon who, at a minimum, pretends that they were very surprised that this was coming to their operating room, to an anesthesiologist, and we've heard stories from other parts of our country of anesthesiologists ripping the checklist poster off the wall of the operating room and rolling it into a ball and throwing it behind the anesthesia machine, that you can have problems if you don't spend the time that it takes to get everybody the message and deliver it in some kind of a personal way. So, nothing replaces the one-on-one. Staff meetings are great at getting general information out. They don't count. Emails, great. No one will read past the second line of your email, so you can pretty much count on that, but you can't count on the email working to make sure that everybody gets this message. Posters don't count, and bulletin boards don't count. The one-on-one conversation is what counts. Now, for this conversation, and when we take it into the operating room, I think that there are 3 general principles, 3 general rules that guide us. And you can put all kinds of different words around these rules, but the thing that holds them up is basic principle. The first thing you need to do is teach people. You need to teach them what the checklist is so that they have some idea about what you're talking about. And for a physician or for other people in the operating room, that can include a reasonably detailed description of why you want to do the checklist work, of the literature that stands behind it, and some of the scientific studies that say communication in the operating room is better than no communication. But teaching them in some form is absolutely important. Now, the problem a lot of times is that's where we stop. We teach people about something, and then we expect that they're going to share our same feeling and passion for whatever it is that we want them to actually do, and teaching all by itself won't get them there. We need to show them. And one of the things we're not going to talk about in depth on this call, but one of the things we found very valuable in the work, and we're going to spend some time talking about it next week, is the use of a video of people actually doing the checklist for your hospital on a video. And a lot of times that's been very helpful to people. Look at the video, hear some of your peers actually doing the checklist, and this is what it looks like. Because describing it in words and actually seeing it in use helps people move the next step. And then the final piece can be have them do it. And this is ideal. So if it's possible, in your one-on-one conversation to teach people what the checklist is about, to show them what it looks like and what it looks like when people do it, and then finally to do a small rehearsal with them or a practice of their parts of it before they ever walk into the operating room. Your ability to have success once you walk through the operating room door with this will be raised exponentially. I'm not saying that that's an easy thing to do, but those 3 steps, if followed, make it much more likely that what you want to do, which is to get people to change and use a tool like the checklist in the operating room, will actually take place. Now I'm going to show you 2 checklists, and I think I've already shared both of these with you on a call previously. But I want to remind you what the basic differences are between the South Carolina checklist and what's done in many hospitals right now. This checklist is filled with processes. One of the processes in the middle, where it says timeout before skin incision, is the Joint Commission Universal Protocol. What's missing from this particular checklist is the conversation. And on the South Carolina Surgical Safety Checklist template here, you can see that the middle column has now been expanded with the briefing, with the conversation where surgeon, anesthesia provider, and nurse all have a role in a discussion that's supposed to take place to the benefit of the patient and the patient's safety. And then finally, at the end of the operation, a small debriefing. Being able to walk in to someone's office, to walk up to them in your hospital with both of these versions of the checklist and be able to show them what you're talking about changing can be incredibly powerful and helpful. Now, I want to talk specifically about engaging physicians, because I think that, as we talked about on other calls, the burden of improving the safety of our hospitals for the last 10 or 15 years has rested largely on the backs of the nurses of the United States. They have gone about as far as they can go by themselves in improving safety. So now, and it's a huge challenge with the surgical safety checklist, it's time that we need to bring the physicians directly into the safety equation. These 2 slides have some things that you can use in a discussion when you have a discussion with a clinician. You can introduce the checklist and emphasize teamwork and communication. So which of the 3 things is that? That's the teach piece, right? So we're going to teach them. This is the checklist. This is what's different about it. It emphasizes teamwork and communication. Something that's very important to everybody that works in a hospital, particularly the physicians, is everybody in the hospital already tries to be safe. No one walks into a hospital in the morning thinking that they're going to injure a patient or would ever purposefully injure a patient. So even without the checklist and all the things that we're going to talk about, people think they're already safe. And that's something that you need to acknowledge right out of the block. We want to make people even safer. For physicians in particular, they look at themselves, both the anesthesiologist and the surgeon, as leaders, and acknowledging that can be very helpful. Something that the surgeon and the anesthesiologist a lot of times don't recognize is that how they act at the very beginning of an operation can set the tone for everything that happens downstream of that. And I hope that makes sense to everybody. In spite of the fact that that makes sense, a lot of physicians don't realize what they look like right now when they do the Joint Commission timeout, particularly when they don't do it well or when they're not engaged in it. That needs to be pointed out in a conversation. Other members of the surgical team follow the lead of the surgeon and the anesthesiologist. And it just makes sense. If they act poorly, the people around them feel like they can also act poorly. An opportunity is given, particularly to the surgeon, to talk about making their plan clear, answering the questions of the people that are around them, demonstrate openness, and probably more important than anything else, show that they're really professional. And again, a lot of physicians forget how they're perceived by the people standing around them. Now, this next question, I think, is very, very important in order to, particularly for the people who honestly believe in their hearts that they can't be any safer than they already are, and that is to ask the physician, the surgeon, if they can't be helped by something like the checklist, is there anybody else in the operating room that could be helped? And almost always, even in a smaller place, the surgeon is aware of somebody around who they believe practice could be markedly improved by using something like the checklist. Well, that in and of itself is a reason to get every single surgeon engaged in the process. If you want your peers to use it, then you need to use it. If you think that one of your peers needs something like this very badly, then the way to get them to use it is for you to take leadership and use it yourself. Now, when you end any of these conversations, you need to think about the fact that you're asking people for help, and that asking people for help to do the work can actually improve their willingness to go along with you. If I come to you and I ask for help, it is a rare physician that will turn you down. And then finally, you can't forget to thank people. First, for the time that they give you to talk to them, but then also for all the work that you want them to do to help you to actually put the checklist into place.